there friends, and thank you for coming back to the channel, and here's another YouTube video for you. Today the topic is 5 beginner composition tips. The first tip that I would say is to plan ahead. You want to know the structure of your composition before you start painting. You're going to want to have a rough draft or a thumbnail available. A rough draft may be a quick sketch, but it may be full size. And a thumbnail is another quick sketch, but it is small. And you may do a couple of these before you decide that you're actually going to put paint to paper. For me, when I'm doing commissions, I do a full rough draft, meaning I have a whole sketch and I will even start painting it, but I won't finish painting it. I will just understand that I want these colors here, and I will show that to my client so that they get an idea of what the final draft will look like before I start in the final draft. So that's something that you may want to consider when making your rough drafts. Thumbnails are smaller. They may only be like a couple inches or so, and you may want to do, 3 to 5 of them. And a thumbnail mostly is just to get a position of where things are going to be on the paper. It's not going to be like very clear sketches because everything is really, really little. It just gets you an idea of where the horizon line might be, where someone's head might be, stuff like that. This one also falls under plan ahead, but I feel like it's a subcategory, so it's going to be our second point. Know your pigments. So when I mean pigments, I mean you may have a color or hue that is made up of a certain pigment mineral, and each pigment behaves differently. So you have granulating and you have staining. And so you're going to know that for granulating colors, you may not want to use that in someone's face. You may want to use more staining colors that'll have a smooth finish, because granulating colors will separate a bit, and if it's on a face, if it's a portrait, it's gonna look a little speckled on the skin. Some people don't mind having granulating colors on the skin in shadows, so that may not matter to you, but you still want to plan your colors ahead. You want to pick roughly 3 to 5 pigments, because some hues may have 3 to 5 pigments in them and it'll be one color. You want to have 3 to 5 pigments on one composition. That's going to make it very cohesive so that it ties together. And just learn how to color mix. So what I do is I'll have a scrap piece of paper, not good paper, just regular watercolor paper like Canson XL. And I may choose a few different pigments that I want to use, and then I will see if they mix well to get a nice cohesive painting along the lines of the hues that I want, along the lines of the values that I want. So plan that ahead of time. The next point I'm gonna have is know your supplies. So I would always advise quality supplies, but when I say quality, I don't necessarily mean more expensive. You can definitely get better quality supplies on a budget. For instance, Prang watercolors and even Crayola watercolors are pretty decent to start off with in the beginning, whereas I would never advise Cotman to someone. That is my personal bias. So yeah, Prang is an inexpensive brand, and then you have Royal Langnickel for brushes, and then you have Canson XL for paper. But not just quality supplies, but you also want to keep in mind, know your supplies. So if you are used to working on arches, you do not want to switch up to working on Canson XL or a different brand for a composition that you really want to be proud of. You don't want that to be the first time that you're working on that new supply. You don't want to start with new brushes. You don't want to start with new paints. So get an idea of the supplies that you work well with, know how to use them, and use the supplies you're familiar with for the composition. For new supplies, I would use that for practice. Practice on those first before you do a full composition so you don't get surprises, okay? And I know that I said quality supplies, but I mostly meant just like supplies that you know. Canson XL is a student grade paper, however, it is reliable. I'm just gonna say that part because I've had other student grade papers that perform differently every single time. Canson XL, you know what you're getting, you know how it's gonna behave, and it is a decent student grade paper that I will always advise if you're on a budget. But if you can upgrade to 100% cotton, I always say Arteza has some pretty inexpensive 100% cotton paper, and so does Paul Rubens. And so if you can just budget those, that'll be great. This next category is also kind of piggybacking off of a category beforehand, was have a solid sketch. So when I said the rough draft, I said that you're going to maybe have a sketch or a thumbnail. But then when we come over to the composition paper, our final draft, have a solid sketch. Take your time. I actually do my sketching on tracing paper, and I mark up my tracing paper where my shadows are going to be, where my highlights are going to be, and map out all of my values. And then once I have a solid sketch on there, I will take that sketch and transfer it over from the tracing paper onto my watercolor paper. So that is something that you may need to consider, because this way I can get all my erasing and my scratching out on another piece of paper and I'm not damaging my watercolor paper. And then I know that my final product is the sketch that I know I want to keep. Now our last category I think is the most important. Remember your fundamentals. Remember your fundamentals. So those fundamentals will be color theory, water control, and values. These three fundamentals I really feel like make a painting. You can have the wrong color but the right value and your brain is going to read it correctly. Color theory, meaning when I was talking about earlier, knowing your pigments and mixing colors, know what mixes are appropriate for what you're looking for. Know your color theory. And then water control, so that you don't have blooms where you don't want them, so you don't have harsh lines where you don't want them. So before you do your final composition, you may want to consider some drills. That'll be in another YouTube video. All right, so thank you friends for joining me for this quick tip video, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get an update every single time I upload a video. Until next time, Muse Crew.